Hey, this is Kyle Stowers, and you're listening to Fish on First.
Welcome back. New edition of Fish on First Live here on the Fish on First podcast presented by Jet Ski Rentals of South Florida, and we are part of the Foul Territory Network. I'm Eli Sussman, the founder of Fish on First, coming at you at the end of this three-game set. Another series win for the Marlins over the Reds, their third consecutive series win in what's been quite a roller coaster of a season, and now they kind of find themselves just in this really exciting spot. Just 6 weeks left in the Marlins season. It is coming to an end pretty quickly, right around the corner, and yet they are still very much in the thick of this with a huge critical series on deck as well that we'll talk about towards the end of the show. Yeah, a whole lot going on here. In fact, it's come to my attention first off that the intro video of ours still has me matched up with Liam Hicks, who was, of course, traded by the Marlins now 2 weeks ago. So this will be the last episode with me and Hicks. You'll have to tune in next time to see who it is that I add in there in a redo of our intro clip that we have here. This might be a solo show from just myself. We will find out as we come along whether other of my staffers join me, but I do have a lot to say, and there's a lot to talk about from this weekend against Cincinnati, starting in a very surprising place with this series finale, the Sunday win. What was the final score even? The final score, very misleading in this one. I believe it was 7-1 at the end of it. But if you watch this game, it was very much up in the air until the final couple innings. Each of the last two games of the series kind of followed that similar rhythm where the Marlins end up winning by pretty significant run differential over the Reds and proving themselves to be the better team. But they certainly had to sweat it out. I think some of the questionable areas of this roster are still highlighted and emphasized, and yet they proved to be the better team. One that I think was quietly pretty important for them as well, just to bury one of the many teams that are still alive in this NL wildcard picture. So I want to start in a very surprising place with Brian Navarreto, the guy who has been hiding in plain sight on this Marlins roster for the better part of 2 months. And despite, again, just kind of as I was saying, hiding in plain sight, he just doesn't play very much for this Marlins team. He's been, I call him very respectfully, like an honorary assistant coach for this Marlins team. But I want to go to the highlights here of Brian Navarreto behind the plate, making a rare start today because the Marlins were facing a left-handed pitcher. They would need to get Joe Mack some occasional day offs behind the plate. And this is him, 2 amazing caught stealings today for the Marlins. And I'm going to get into the significance of these particular plays as well. But Brian Navarreto reminding people that he existed on the same day that I mentioned him in an article about his tenuous spot on this Marlins roster in the first place. The third string catcher on a team that I don't think really needs a third string catcher, but 2 critical caught stealings in this game to keep it scoreless for the Marlins to eventually pull ahead later on. And a guy that I just could not have imagined would have this long of a tenure on the Marlins roster. We saw him for a cup of coffee last year, I think just for the month of September. It may have not even been the entire month. And now he's been kind of a staple of this Marlins bench for quite a while. And having a game here that was, I guess you'd have to say, his best game of the season. And the competition was very limited for him when it comes to that category, just because this is a guy that is hitting 087 this season. We're in August and he's still hitting 087, a 192 on base, a 130 slugging percentage. He doesn't have a single hit in over a month dating back to early July. And yet he today kind of reinforced his spot on this roster. So congrats to him making those plays. The first one on a breaking ball as well. Very hard. I mentioned this in a tweet on Fish on First, about as hard a caught stealing attempt as you could possibly have, facing Ellie De La Cruz as the base runner. And with Yuri Perez on the mound, we're going to get into Yuri in just a moment, him being so slow to the plate, so notoriously bad at holding on runners. And for the pitch to be one of Yuri's slowest pitches of the entire day and able to get that caught stealing, very early on, Navarreto left his stamp on this game. So yeah, the Marlins taking 2 out of 3 overall with this series finale. So yeah, we'll work our way backwards, just because I feel like this game itself was so fascinating, despite the final score making it seem more comfortable than it actually was. A very unpopular starting lineup, seeing not only Navarreto in there, but also Leo Jimenez as the Marlins starting first baseman. The idea that the Marlins still have both of those guys on this roster this deep into the year, even though they don't provide much in the way of power or base running. And frankly, in terms of defense, I think Navarreto has been, I think that's still kind of up for debate exactly how impactful he is defensively, although he is certainly a defense before offense sort of guy. And yet those guys have stuck around. The Marlins have been very limited when it comes to like options that they really trust at the plate from the right side of the plate, both of them in the lineup against the lefty. And although the Marlins end up putting up 7 runs on the Reds in this game, they didn't put up any runs at all against the left-handed starter, Nick Lodolo. So the entire idea of putting those guys in the lineup, I guess it more so in Leo's case than in Navarreto. Like Navarreto, you're not expecting much offense regardless. But the way that they put this lineup together, sitting a ton of their most impactful lefty batters, was because they thought that lineup would give them the best chance with the platoon advantage. And it just did not work out whatsoever. We've seen a few games lately where the Marlins actually have gone off against the lefty starter, but today was not one of them, despite being so obedient to the platoon advantage in this one. And yet they end up breaking through late in this game, where it's because the reason why I was able to stay close in the first place was Yuri being able to go as deep into the game as he did and as effective as he was. Yeah, we need to talk about Yuri, even though I know I spent a lot of time on him on the previous show, that this is a guy that is really coming into his own, and I'd say scratching his ultimate potential is kind of underselling him at this point. We're now looking at this extended stretch where Perez has been an elite starting pitcher in all of baseball, going back ever since he came off the IL. If you want to go back a little bit further, even right before he went on the IL in late May, the key to that has been this. That brought up about the change in the batted ball profile against him has been a big difference. This is a guy that is striking out about the same percentage of batters as he has before. And today he actually walked one of his highest totals of the entire season, 5 walks against this pretty impotent Cincinnati Reds offense. He did give them a chance by doing that. And yet it's the reason why he's still able to have such consistent success mainly starts here. Like, this is a day and age that we live in where home runs go so far when it comes to deciding the outcomes of games. And Yuri is not allowing any of them going back to the end of June. He allowed a home run in Coors Field, I believe it was, in the first inning of his start on June 30th. We're more than a month and a half later, and he still has not allowed another one. That is 55 straight innings without allowing a homer, which I have to believe is very high up on the list of longest streaks by a Marlins starting pitcher ever. I know they've had a few relievers, like over a similar length of time, not allow a homer. But for a starter, when you're facing guys multiple times in a game, and in Yuri's case, for a lot of this stretch, he's going 3 full times through the lineup and not make one big enough mistake, not get clipped by a guy sitting on a particular pitch is, as I say right there, it's mind-boggling. This because, especially as a guy that has been an extreme fly ball pitcher for so much of his major league career, including earlier this year. Like, if you look at his stats, I got to pull it up, how many home runs he allowed before this drought. That was a pretty big issue for him and why his season was kind of seen as disappointing through the first couple months. He'd allowed 13 homers before the streak happened. And now this is crazy. Like, this streak is long enough that his homerless streak is almost matching the entire season that he had prior to the streak beginning. This is almost half of his season now that he's gone without allowing a home run. And it has dropped his ERA to 3.23. That is right in line with his rookie season. At a time when, again, he's not been perfect. The control issues have been a little bit up and down this year. They were especially problematic early on. And then today was a reminder that he's not fully past them. And yet the incorporation of that sinker into his pitch mix has really led to him missing more barrels than ever before, and has led to a lot of ground balls. Even when guys do make hard contact, it stays on the ground. And the results are astonishing as of late. And then now the season overall that he's having is now pretty close to what you would have hoped for coming into the year. I know we did spend a good amount of time on him last time, so I don't want to keep beating a dead horse at this point, other than to say that I think one of my takeaways from this weekend, because Sandy also pitched very well in a tough luck loss in the series opener. This is just a reminder of how long the baseball season is. I love when we reach these inflection points that remind you how many ups and downs there are over the course of a major league season. The Marlins' lone pitching all-star this year was Max Meyer. He was unequivocally their most valuable starting pitcher through the first 3 months of the regular season, a very deserved all-star. And we're just another 2 months later, not even 2 months since he was selected. There's still a lot of the year to go. And yet it's still apparent at this point that despite Max being the all-star, despite him being such a big surprise, he's going to be the third most memorable starting pitcher from the season. When all is said and done and the dust settles, unless he makes a miraculous recovery from his neck injury, it doesn't sound like he's going to come back until the very end of the season, if at all. He's going to go be the number 3 pitcher that we remember from this Marlins season, because we're going to remember Sandy reestablishing himself as this ultra reliable workhorse. He's going to lead the majors in innings pitched, and we're going to remember all the records that he set this year in Marlins history for innings pitched, for strikeouts, for starts, for quality starts, for wins at Lone Depot Park. We're going to remember that for sure. And I think we're going to remember Yuri's season if he stays on this track. Now, his year's not over yet. This is a reminder that things could go downhill again for him late. And he's now going to be pitching innings that he's never pitched before in a full year. So to assume that he's going to be healthy for every scheduled start down the stretch is a little bit of a stretch. That being said, I that's the direction that we're headed, where Max is going to be in people's memories, and in reality, he's going to be the number 3 starter from this Marlins season, despite how successful he was early on. And it came pretty apparent to me at the All-Star break when we got there, and we knew that the Marlins were going to be short on starting pitching depth down the stretch. Who is it going to make the difference? Who's going to be the X factor the rest of the season? And to me, it was always Yuri, and that is kind of proving to be true. And they've got in what has been a realistic best case scenario, to be sure, a guy that's pitching to a sub-2 ERA over these last couple months, while pitching deep into games as well. All these games, he's not only often getting into the 6th inning, he is consistently completing 6 innings almost every time, and often getting into the 7th inning. So that's been huge for him, and that's been huge for the team overall. It's a reason why I think their bullpen has been performing better as well as we've gotten to these past couple weeks when it comes to that. So yeah, I want to circle back a little bit more towards the game and the decisions that were made late. The fact that Navarreto not only started the game, but he stayed in for the entire game, something that he'd only done 3 times the entire year up to this point, because almost always, as Beefcat brings up in the comments, almost always they're going to pinch hit for him once the lefty is out of the game, and especially when the game is in doubt. And just a really strange decision-making, what I feel has been very inconsistent decision-making when it comes to the Marlins, when it comes to these late game matchup situations, where there are moments where they're always looking for platoon advantages. A great example of that is from Saturday, as we'll get to, taking out Jacob Marcy late in that game. And then today, it was sticking with a guy that just has not performed against pitchers of either handedness this season, having Navarreto bat for himself in a tie game in a quintessential high leverage situation, knowing deep in your soul that he is not going to do anything positive during that plate appearance. And sure enough, did not. The Marlins end up in this game sitting most of their left-handed batters until the very, very, very end. 2 of them got the full day off. Owen Casey got the full day off. Who was the other lefty that did? Because Conine made that pinch hit appearance late, and Graham Pauley played at the very end. He finished the game at first base, but it was both Casey and the other left-handed batter that was sitting throughout the entire game was Joe Mack. Joe Mack got a full day off, which has been very rare for him this season as well. So, and Mack himself has continued to hit very well. So really surprising decision-making when it came to that, and Marlins able to pull it out. So yeah, just to get a little bit more into this rally before we go into break. Yeah, the Marlins end up scoring 7 on the Reds in those final 2 innings. Against the Reds bullpen, it was against TJ Antone. They got the first couple of runs, and then they blew it open against Ron Marinaccio when he came in place of Antone. So 7 runs against those 2 guys combined. They got some help from some shaky Reds fielding. The Reds made 3 total errors in this game, including a couple by Ellie De La Cruz. And it was Roberto Hernandez who really broke the seal in this game. So it took a while to get there. And I should have mentioned him earlier, a guy that had a very good series overall for Bert, and a guy that now is the inside track to lead the team in home runs this season. His 18th home run of the year, came against a right-handed pitcher. That's been kind of the story of him for the past couple of years combined. He's a little bit better against lefties, but he does barrel the ball against anybody when he there's really no qualifiers that you need at this point other than to say that like Burt has been their most important right-handed bat this year, outside of Otto Lopez, I would say overall. So number two ain't bad on this entire team. He breaks it open. A lot of good patience that the team showed. 7 walks in this series finale, which is one of their higher totals in a 9-inning game this season. So that was great to see. Almost all of those came late in the game off the bullpen. It was 5 combined of those 7 walks came in those final 2 innings against Anton and Marinaccio. It was Conine that added that key second run in the 8th inning. They gave one of those runs immediately back in the bottom of the 8th, so that seems huge at the time, and then really blew it open in the 9th inning with Augustin Ramirez. He's the last thing I'll get to before going to the break. This is one of Gus's better games of the year. It's a pretty limited list to choose from because Gus just has had a really disappointing year overall. But this one, the starting DH for the team, and it was a 2-run double that he ripped to right center in that 9th inning with 2 outs as well. A 2-out, 2-run double that took their lead from 2-1 to 4-1. That's been such a rare sight for Gus this year. Like, he just has not hit the ball hard and in the air to the opposite field whatsoever. And to see that happen was really encouraging. Like, the exit velo has been there pretty consistently this year. It's just that the trajectory of those balls and especially the use of it to the opposite field has not. This was a really nice step for Gus, seeing him do that. A day where I don't know if he should be hitting 3rd in the lineup on any particular day, even with Stowers down at the moments. Like, that feels a bit too high. But then again, like, some of the key hitters on this team have been struggling as of late anyway. So I could kind of see both sides. Just good for him overall. Just to put into perspective, he is hitting 304 since coming back from the minors. 304, 385, 391 slash line. So that is well above league average hitter overall, but not extraordinary, of course, because that was only his 2nd extra base hit. Still no home runs. He'd only driven in 1 run prior to that hit today. And the strikeout rate, 8 in 26 plate appearances? That's a tiny bit high for him, all things considered. But nonetheless, you got to feel good for Gus because he's certainly going to be a big part of this offense down the stretch of this season. Doubly so while Stowers is out for the time being, and especially if the team is still kind of reluctant to call up another right-handed power bat from AAA the way that I've been advocating for. So it shows a lot of faith in Gus that they have been using him as much as they have been today. Started against a left-handed pitcher. We've seen him make some starts though against righties as well. So not strictly a small slide platoon guy. He's kind of in there every other day. And on the most of the days when he's on the bench, they find an opportunity for him to pinch hit at various points as well. So a smaller role than they envisioned for Gus coming out of spring training. But nonetheless, it is working better this month than it was during, the first month plus of the season that got him demoted to AAA. So more to cover on this series, on the state of the roster. And I'll get to more of your comments in the live chat. So keep those coming on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. We're going to take a quick break and hear from our friends at Fabletics. So we'll talk to you on the other side.
Let's talk Fabletics, shall we? They have apparel for every season. We're wearing it as we talk about it. It's soft, it's comfortable. I wear it on the show sometimes on FT. What else do you love about it, Kratz?
Well, I have it on right now, and I'm all about quality. But you know what? You know how good your clothes are when you're a parent, and your kids keep stealing all of it. My daughter stole the sweatshirt. My son stole one of my T-shirts. So it's got to be nice looking.
And if it gets a little bit chillier, then it's layering season, and they've got layers for the fall. Shop now at fabletics.com/foul to get 70 to 80% off everything when you sign up as a new VIP. Take a quick style quiz and be sure to select foul when prompted to unlock this offer. This is a limited time offer, so do not wait. Again, that's fabletics.com/FOUL for 70 to 80% off everything as a new VIP.
Something I wanted to bring up, as MJS mentions in the chat, is revisiting this Leo Jimenez situation. He did have a single today towards the end of that game. And overall, he's still been a significant part of this team this deep into the year, something that I did not foresee. And it is But yeah, it's getting at this point kind of difficult to rationalize exactly why the Marlins have stuck with him this long. For one, he is out of minor league options. That should be made clear that if the Marlins do designate him for assignment, they risk losing him overall. It just comes down to whether you feel that's going to be any sort of significant loss. Like if you've been watching him play this year and just seen some of the limitations that he has as an impact player in all facets of the game, like he doesn't really add much aside from consistently makes decent contact, and he does put the ball in play at a high rate. So I mean by that, both the contact skills are there and the exit velos are kind of interesting, although they do plateau at a pretty low level. That shows that, it's going to be a lot more singles than it is going to be extra base hits. He doesn't offer much outside of that. And yet it's still, the production hasn't been there, and yet he still remains a significant part of the team. So at this point, I've kind of run out of like theories as to why that is, that he's still around. Something that comes up in terms of Navarreto's spot on this roster, I think that is a little bit more clear, aside from games like today, that we're reaching a point in the season where Joe Mack has caught more innings in 2026 than he has in any full season of his baseball life. And yet there's still another month and a half still to go. So I feel like that part is about pacing Mac a little bit down the stretch, where they obviously want him to be their primary catcher the rest of the way. And they're still going to be playing Gus behind the plate once a week or so. So it's between those, having two separate backups to Mac is able to, I guess, limit his workload in a more subtle way and keep him fresh down the stretch. That one's a little bit more understandable. It's just that, as I highlighted today, Davis and De Los Santos has been playing very well for an extended period of time down in Jacksonville. The power upside is pretty immense. The contact skills have been just as good as Jimenez, maybe a little. It's really close, whether between their bat to ball skills. And I think something that shouldn't be overlooked is that De Los Santos is a pretty smooth defensive first baseman in terms of both the picks that he makes, his stretches, his defensive positioning overall. Like he would be their best defensive first baseman on their roster easily right now. And even when Stowers gets back, you can make a debate one way or the other when it comes to that. The fact that Graham Pauley is their like best defensive solution at that position right now, despite him having kind of a lack of experience there, just they don't have a first baseman at all right now on their entire roster. That's kind of as simply put as where we are right now. They have a big void at that entire position. Meanwhile, they have both De Los Santos at AAA, along with Jonathan Long and Kemp Alderman. Kemp Alderman has been learning that position for the first time this season. And yet, all three of those guys, despite their superior power upside, right now still blocked by Jimenez. And it seems like that'll be the case at least until rosters expand a couple weeks from now, September 1st. And then by then, maybe Stowers will get back anyway. So it's I feel like it's a missed opportunity almost as much as when it comes to competing. When you're looking at any of those guys as prospects, you're not counting on them to provide a certain level of production. Like rookies are so volatile. There's no saying that any of those guys are actually going to be better than Jimenez, especially over a partial season sample. It's just that you need to make decisions for 2027 and beyond. You need to know what you have in those guys. And for De Los Santos in particular, he's the one that's weighing heavy on my mind because he's been at AAA for 2.5 seasons at this point. There's just nothing more that you're going to learn about him down at that level that you haven't already learned. And yet there's still going to be somewhat of an unknown until you actually test him at the big league level on some sort of consistent basis. To this point, he has played 3 total games in the big leagues. I don't think he's played a single complete game from start to finish out of those 3. So they just have not given him the opportunity to sink or swim yet. And I felt like this would be an optimal opportunity to do that they missed out on. So some final thoughts on this Marlins Reds series. We covered quite a bit about this Sunday series finale. Saturday, another game that was more competitive than the final score would indicate. The Marlins end up winning 8-4, and they end up using Pete Fairbanks at the end of the game. It wasn't a safe situation, but it would have been until the Marlins added more insurance late. It followed a similar pattern to Sunday's game, in that the Marlins offense did very little early on and then erupted as the game went on. They ended up scoring 1 run apiece in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th innings, but they were down 4-3 entering the 8th. And so in the 8th inning, they rallied once again against TJ Antone, the same guy that was right in the middle of Sunday's loss, was in the middle of Saturday's as well. And in that case, it wasn't a walks issue, but more about hit by pitches, right? 3 hit by pitches for the Marlins in that game. They are very quietly heading towards a franchise record for offensive hit by pitches. So that's not something that you can do too much to really strategize around or do intentionally, but that is a sneaky significant part of their offense this season is the fact that they've taken as a, on pace more hit by pitches per game than any other team in Marlins history. So in this case, Conan gets on by 1, Casey and Ruiz. I believe that Ruiz one was the most significant in terms of like swinging the win probability late on. So in that game, the Marlins end up having 14 hits and they stranded a ton of runners, 4 for 18 with runners in scoring position, but ends up cashing several of those runs on walks and hit by pitches to win that game. And the really bizarre decision there was Jacob Marcy getting removed in that 8th inning, where he had a 4-hit game to that point, his first 4-hit game of the season. I believe the game was tied at that moment with runners on first and second. And for a guy that's been playing so well, just because he happened to go up against another left-handed pitcher, in this case, Sam Maul, not a particularly good left-handed pitcher when it comes to it. And Maul, he was awful last year in a short sample. This year, it's been like a semi bounce back, but still a guy that is just not particularly imposing, a guy that you could put balls in play against, and himself will deliver quite a few walks. They end up putting Gus in place of Marcy, despite the 4 hits that the Marcy had to that point, all really great quality contact as well for Marcy to that point in the game. And he's one of those guys that he's been playing well for such an extended period of time. And Gus, to that point, even including the walk that he drew in that situation, the game that he had on Sunday, you would think that Gus could pinch hit for other guys in this lineup, but that Marcy would be exempt from that. And yet the Marlins very religiously played the platoon splits in that situation. And it ends up paying off. And it ends up paying off not directly because of Gus, but because Bert had that go-ahead 2-run hit in that 8th inning that put them ahead for good at that point. So I saw some interesting discourse about that decision and how the Marlins handled it. Some defenders of the Marlins and McCullough, because Gus did get on base and because of the way that the inning went, how it should. But I mean, that was one where they wanted Gus to drive in a run in that situation. And technically he didn't do that. He passed the baton to the next guy, and it ended up taking that 2-out hit from Bert to actually put them on top. And Bert was already in that lineup. There was no additional move required for that. So I think we jumped through some interesting hoops to grade these moves in hindsight when things like that happen. And so it did pay off for the Marlins, but it paid off because Bert had just an amazing weekend, more so than it did being any sort of ingenious decision to take out your hottest hitter in that moment. And to their credit, at least Marcy did get that start today on Sunday against the lefty at the very bottom of the lineup. We've seen plenty of games where he's been benched against lefties, especially over this. I guess a lot of that happened in June and early July. And now he's kind of restored his stock enough that he's in the lineup almost every day, once again, just like he was for the first third of the season or so. Yes, and we are wrong once in a while when it comes to this stuff. I'm fully accountable when the guesses that I make and the analysis that I make proves to be inaccurate. So I like to be self-deprecating about a lot of that. But yeah, in this case, I felt pretty. I think it's there's been a lot of very questionable decision-making approaches when it comes to the use of players, the use of hitters in those late game situations. And now, to be fair, and something I talked to Clayton about a few weeks ago, is that like the Marlins as a whole have been incredible at pinch hitting this season. Like the buttons that they do press in those situations have paid off a remarkable amount of the time. They are comfortably a top 5 pinch hitting offense in all baseball. I don't know if people realize that. Bert has been the most exceptional one, but over the course of this weekend, for example, that Gus walk, the Griffin Conine walk, I mean, those count and those make a difference. And if you add it all up, Marlins pinch hitters this season, last time I checked, it was an OPS well above 800 for that entire group. And in a role that traditionally, just to put in perspective, usually guys perform worse as pinch hitters than they do under regular circumstances. I think you do have to give some credit to not necessarily playing the right matchups, but sort of the intangible stuff as well that they're doing to prepare those guys for the particular matchups in terms of hunting particular pitches, knowing the way that their swing is going to play against the pitch profiles that the presumed reliever has. I think the Marlins have been very prepared from that regard, and it's showing up in that way. And I think it's more than just good luck at this point when you have a lot of different players that are doing well in those circumstances, players that haven't really been used as pinch hitters very often in their careers. These very young hitters aren't used to being used in that situation. It's more of a veteran role that they're accustomed to. And I think at this point, we're this deep into the season, and a lot of different players are succeeding under those circumstances. I have to just tip my cap to them when it comes to that, sort of give them the benefit of the doubt when it comes to more of those decisions. So I recognize that, and we're deep enough into the year, and enough of those moves have, like, their results have been surprisingly good that I think it's more than a coincidence at this point when it comes to that. So last thing on the series, just circling back to that very first game, the 1-0 loss for the Marlins, despite Sandy having another excellent outing. I don't think he allowed that run until the 6th inning. Like, he was really cruising for a lot of this one. He was even sharper than Yuri was in the series finale. So very frustrating whenever you waste a performance from him like that. Now, he didn't have much swing and miss, only 2 strikeouts for him as a whole in that one. It wasn't his A game. And, it comes with the caveat that he goes against this Reds offense that has been struggling a lot this year. But still, for the most part, it was a pretty impressive outing from Sandy, and he gave them basically everything you could want. Usually 1 run is enough for the Marlins to do something with it. But Chase Burns he was our series MVP when it came to the FOF live predictions that we made, because he was, of all the good starting pitching performances in this series, Burns was number 1. 7 scoreless innings, 8 strikeouts with 0 walks. I mentioned how the other pitchers on this Reds pitching staff had a lot of issues with control over the course of these 3 games, and Burns absolutely not. In fact, the Reds as a whole didn't walk a single batter in this game. So yeah, in this case, Burns just outdueled him, and that's where you just got to tip your cap to one of the guy that's emerging as one of the premier pitchers in all of baseball. All due respect to what Sandy has done this year and to how well Yuri has pitched lately, and even what Max Meyer did during the first half of the season. But Burns is kind of ahead of all of them right now when it comes to the ace rankings, any way you want to slice it. He's just been that premier type of pitcher that can single-handedly dismantle any team. So yeah, the Marlins don't sweep the series, and things were but ultimately, I think Burns is kind of the only reason why they didn't. The Marlins were significantly, I think they were the better team over the course of this weekend, and this was a sweepable series if they had faced literally anybody other than Chase Burns in that opener. And there's really nothing to be too bitter about when it comes to that outcome in the very first game. So yeah, on the other side of the break, this next break, we're going to get to the updated wildcard standings, more into the Phillies series as well. The last thing I wanted to touch on first about this weekend was Otto Lopez, because I was pretty prepared to go into detail about his struggles on the last month or so since the All-Star break. He's been one of the worst qualified hitters in the league over that span of time, and yet he's still hitting at the top of the Marlins lineup, and still they're still giving him every chance possible to dig out of it. Meanwhile, his OPS has dipped below 800 for the first time all season long. He hasn't hit a home run in a very long time, and there have been some very low moments. But the one thing that did stick out to me about especially the final game of this series is that he was showing some sneaky, encouraging signs. I think he went 1 for 4 with a walk in the series finale, and 2 of the outs he made were really barreled up pieces of contact to the outfield that could have resulted in extra bases if they'd gone in a slightly different direction. That today was one of the more encouraging days that I've seen from him over the course of this entire month. Like, I've tried to pin down how much of this is just bad luck, evening out after being somewhat lucky the first half of the year. How much of it is that finger injury, the one that he sustained in Milwaukee right after the All-Star break? How much is that kind of weighing on him and making a difference? But then I see the quality of the at-bats that he had today on Sunday and felt really encouraged by it. So just something to keep in mind moving forward. He's going to be such a critical piece, of course, for the Marlins the rest of the season. Like, the difference between him continuing to struggle versus him being performing at his career average the rest of the season versus him actually recapturing that first half form, that variance is going to be worth multiple wins in either direction. Like, Otto Lopez is, as much as I emphasize Yuri as kind of one of the X factors for the Marlins the rest of this season, if we look at the final 38 games that they have left at this point, I think you'd have to hone in on Otto at this point because the variance is not pretty wide. Like we've seen this guy that has been terrible offensively for the last month and versus somebody that was the very best player that they had on their entire team during the first half of the season. And the difference between those are, especially for a team that just does not have a backup, like are you going to put it in Javier Snoja's hands if the worst case scenario occurs? Other than that, they just do not have a fallback option if Otto is not there every single day. So to me, if you really zone in on where we're going these last 6 weeks of the season, like Otto is now the main character that I'm going to be following the rest of the way. So yeah, on the other side of the break, I think we're going to welcome in Isaac Azut from his car. And then we're going to talk about the wild card stuff, the Phillies stuff, make some predictions. And first, hearing from our friends at Jet Ski Rentals of South Florida. Friends at Jet Ski Rentals of South Florida, they present all of our podcast efforts here on Fish on First, Miami's best jet ski and boat adventures. Jet Ski Rentals of South Florida, with 6 jet ski locations and over 120 boats. There's something for every style and every budget. Ride jet skis right in front of the downtown skyline and Ferris wheel, or book your own private boat starting as low as $300 with the captain included. Bring your drinks to your friends and enjoy the water your way. The boat is completely yours for the time you reserve it. The reservation based only. To book, call 305-990-2192 or check them out online at sfjetskirentals.com. Make sure to use our promo code FISHONFIRST, and that gets you a 10% discount off your next booking. Again, that's 305-990-2192 or online at sfjetskirentals.com. Isaac has promised me a good 7 to 10 minutes while he's in the car going from somewhere to somewhere else. One point that was brought up to me just now in the live chat, Isaac, was to get our take on that play from Friday that I'm sure you're aware of, where Sandy had the longest scoreless streak of his career. He was closing in on the longest scoreless streak in Marlins history. And the reason why they end up losing that game, ultimately, what makes a difference is that Heriberto Hernandez kind of sloppy sliding catch in a attempt in left field that allows a runner to score all the way from first base. The ball goes to the wall. And I've already covered how he kind of avenged himself the rest of the weekends. But I suppose that when he's able to do what he's capable of doing offensively, where you're able to live with some of the shortcomings on defense, right?
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, Bird, I'm not sure how the defensive metrics would showcase his performance in the corner outfield spots, mostly in left field. But for the most part, he does a pretty solid job in the corners, cutting balls off when he needs to, making the smart throws, the correct throws when he has to. And so that play, as ugly as it was, I think that's just an example of the game speeding up on him in that case. It was a pivotal spot. Their ace is on the mound. And it was just like a really sloppy play, obviously. But, I think that's an example of the game just speeding up on him a bit. And absolutely, when he's leading your team in home runs, he's doing it after being sent down to AAA. And he's basically, like you said, made up for the rest of the weekend. I think you can live with that. And you know what? It's not his fault that the Marlins offense, well, I guess partially, but it's not his fault that the Marlins offense gave up or were able to provide 0 runs the whole day for their ace. So that was partially why they lost. But, when you look back at it, I'm sure he would tell you the same thing. Let the ball bounce in front of you. There's 2 out. The runner will not score. You cut it off. But he just tried to make a heroic dive. It just looked so poorly because the ball was 5 feet to his left. So that's what made it look really bad. But for the most part, he's a solid corner outfielder, and he's leading the team in home runs. He's one of the best offensive players they have. So, yes, you live with that any day of the week and twice on Sunday.
We have a very useful live update in the chat from Ed Weiss that Kemp Alderman just hit yet another home run, his 17th of the year in Jacksonville. I don't know how much you're able to share in public about this, but I know we talked about it privately a bit earlier today about kind of where they stand with these guys at AAA Jacksonville between De Los Santos, Kemp Alderman, and Jonathan Long, and how all 3 of them are still somehow stranded in Jacksonville right now, even while the Marlins are essentially without a first baseman. How do you think that is going to play out the rest of the season between those guys? Which of them do you think is best positioned to get called up at some point, and how long do we have to wait for that to happen in all likelihood?
I have a lot on this one because, one, back in our day, Eli, the major league roster would grow to 40 in September. So now you only get 2 September call-ups. And so what I was told is that Kemp Alderman his call-up was imminent before he was hurt initially, which I believe happened back in May. or June. So that he played his way out of it. It took him a little bit to get going, and then now he's really hitting the ball a little bit better. So from what I understand, the Marlins like Kemp. They don't think he's a corner outfielder in the future whatsoever. They really hate what they see defensively from the right fielder. He can throw a little bit. I think they see him as a future first baseman DH, and that seems to be sort of a redundant or a superfluous position that they have here at the quad A level, quote unquote. They like Davison, but I think they do view, despite what I just mentioned, they do view Kemp as a higher quantity, as a higher quality guy, as well as Jonathan Long. They do like Jonathan Long, and the irony is that Peter Bendix acquired all three of these guys, all three in Kemp, Jonathan, and Davison. But from what I understand, Davison is the third tier of those three. So from the way the organization sees it, I would expect a pitcher to get called up because they always call up an extra arm, and one of between Kemp and Jonathan Long. And I really don't know which direction they go. I think it's really hard to tell because Kemp, like I said, he was about to get called up. He is more than major league ready. There's nothing left to prove at AAA. Jonathan, maybe they want to see what he's got at AAA a little bit more, even though he's really proven his way past that level as well. So you could see a world where he called them both up, but then that would have to mean some sort of move with Leo Jimenez, Brian Alvaretto. There's just too many people taking up not enough spots. So the only thing I can say is that they do view Jonathan and Kemp as more long-term major league pieces than Davison, although I would argue that Davison needs to be up right now, if only to be evaluated to see what he can actually do, particularly against left-handed pitching, because, hey, you're going to Citizens Bank Park, you're playing must-win games the rest of the way here against a team that's up on you by 3 games. Davison could run into a few. He showed what he can do in his very, very limited time. I would call him up. Leo should not be playing first base. But Navarreto showed what he can do behind the plate. I'm sure he talked about that already. But yeah, they like Jonathan. They like Kemp. One of those two will be up in September.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, yeah, you can look at it several ways about they do have a lot of offensive upside with the guys already on the roster if they're all firing at the same time. I covered before the break that Otto is in the middle of a very long slump. He might be just subtly pulling out of it finally, but Xavier Edwards has also been a lesser version of himself for a while. Wouldn't necessarily call it as deep a slump as Otto's, but the thing is, it's been cyclical, and that's usually how it plays out, where you don't get all these guys firing at the same time, and that's why you got to sometimes take your chances with those that are less established and hope to catch lightning in a bottle with them. We will now take a quick look at the wildcard standings where we are at this very, very moment, and this is while the Padres game is in the 8th inning or so. It looks like the Padres are going to win. For the moment, I just want to make sure people realize where things, the hierarchy here. It is the Phillies that for the next few minutes hold the number 1 wild card spot. The Padres win, then they're going to be tied for the second wild card spot. The Cubs are kind of running away with that first wild card spot at this point. 20 games over 500. The Marlins are playing for second in all likelihood in that third spot. It's the Phillies that hold the second spot for the moment, and the Padres are about to retie them right there, which means lose the D-backs as the first team out, and then the Marlins as the next team out after that. Just to show people, the Reds were kind of in the picture and still are sort of at this point. Their playoff odds are now a fraction of 1%, according to Fangraphs. I think we saw why, between the lack of command that their relievers have and the lack of offense that they have from anybody outside of Ellie De La Cruz and Sal Stewart. The Reds are pretty much out of it. And the Pirates and the Cardinals are still kind of in the mix there as well. So although the Marlins are going to want to be focusing on the teams ahead of them, there are still ones behind them that have a chance as we get down the stretch here. And it's as why we'll get into this Philly series in a moment, why it's so consequential. Like Isaac, you were covering the last when the Phillies and Marlins played a series with real ramifications to it, the 2023 wild card series, when they actually got into the playoffs. This would have to be the biggest matchup between them since then, given where we are in the calendar and the fact that it's only a 3-game gap between them overall, with 3 games coming up at Citizens Bank Park.
Yeah, the Marlins tend to play better in Philly than they do at Truist, just thinking of House of Horrors for the Marlins. But yeah, that wild card series, and just obviously, I think it's obvious, but the Marlins are a much, much better team than they were in that 23 wild card series. No offense to Skip and Kimang, but this team is a lot deeper. The Phillies have their flaws. right now, but they just came back from 5-0 to the Twins to win today's ball game. And Yohan Duran, they just have a deep bullpen. They've got a deep offense, and they just have a bunch of veterans that know what they're doing. So it's going to be tough. And this is a situation where, go back, we were talking about earlier, that yes, maybe Leo Jimenez is better than what he's shown. And I understand that if you do send him down, you'd be DFAing him because he has no minor league options left. But even if best case scenario, Leo Jimenez becomes what Peter Bendix and company think he can be, what's the ultimate ceiling there? I think you need to put out all hands on deck here, because I understand you didn't buy at the deadline. However, you have some pieces, formidable pieces that we thought would be used at this point. This is late August now. We're already officially past August 15. You'd think that, hey, they would call up some of their weapons. Now, I understand Carson Milgren should not be called up. Yuri and Sandy have been holding their own. Tyler Phillips have been doing fine. Gusto, whatever. But, I think they should be really trying to see what they can do, especially with Sowers on the IL at first base, and Leo Jimenez and Graham Polley are not going to cut it. So this series, correct, Eli, to answer your question, this is by far the most pivotal series, regular season series against the Phillies, and one would argue one of their most pivotal series in regular season time since at least 2023, because the last 2 years, they were important. I remember the Citizens Bank series last year where Bird hit that home run against Duran. It was pivotal, but not quite as pivotal as what this is going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, thank you for reminding me about that, because that was one of the final. They were still technically alive for postseason berths during that series.
Barely.
I do remember a few moments from that. Griff made his return from the IL at the start of that series. I remember that storyline going along. I mean, that kind of felt like as big a storyline as them actually being alive, because their chances were so slim at that point that one of the crazier aspects was that Griff had made it back from what should have been a season-ending injury and immediately was producing. Looking at the pitching probables for these next 3 days, it's going to be Sandy in the finale, but working towards that. In the first game, it's Jansen Junk versus Christopher Sanchez. So another lefty for the Marlins to face. A reminder, they just faced one today and got held scoreless by Nick Lodolo. And now they're going against one of the premier lefties in all of baseball, and Sanchez, who has had considerable success against them throughout his career. In that middle game, interestingly, they have it as a TBD for the Marlins on Tuesday. That should be Tyler Phillips. Maybe they're playing around with a potential opener or something. It struck me, definitely raised my antenna that Phillips is not locked in there for the moment, but that would be his regularly scheduled turn in the rotation. Zach Wheeler on the other side. Wheeler has got off to an awesome first half of the season, but actually has struggled since then. The Marlins remember that from their last matchup against him in Miami. They really did hit him around legitimately and shockingly during the previous series. And then in that finale, it's Sandy against Aaron Nola. And we've covered how good Sandy has been as of late. And Nola himself having a pretty bad year, all things considered, although, slightly better than 2025. He's shown some glimpses, but the upside just isn't really there at this moment. The one variable we should also bring up aside from that is Luis Arraez, another matchup with him, another different team for Arraez. Got traded to the Padres 2.5 seasons ago, and then started this year with the Giants, and then got traded at the deadline to the Phillies. And overall, he's been fine for them. They've had to, I guess one interesting aspect is they've had to reshuffle their entire defensive alignment around him to make room for him at second base, moving your guy Bryce Harper back to the outfield for the first time in a bunch of years, moving Alec Boehm over to first base, Bryson Stott to third base. So yeah, what do you make of his fit with the Phillies that I think caught some people by surprise, and the way that they have really reoriented a lot of their offense to make it work with him?
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a whole lot of talk about just the value that a Luis Arraez provides, but the bottom line is that Luis Arraez makes any lineup better, right? He's not going to strike out. He's going to put the ball in play. Does he hurt you defensively? Not really this year. Does he hurt you with his base running? Maybe. But that's a guy that's going to be tough to get out for these Marlins pitchers. I can foresee the future of Sandy and Tyler and Jung. I can see Luis Arraez having a really big series, unfortunately, for this team. Now, if I were the Phillies, would I really realign my entire defense for this guy? I'm not sure. Bryce Harper, he did what any real superstar would do, is change his position to move to first base from the outfield. So to move him back to the outfield is just a little bit strange. But it's going to be a tough series for Miami just because of the length that this lineup has. And Luis Arraez, I'm sure he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder to play against the Marlins. every single time. I remember his first series against Miami as a member of the Padres. He was just outstanding. So I expect more of the same.
And just for those curious, I looked it up, having a discussion with some fans earlier today, that the Marlins have not, if they sweep this series, then they'll be tied with the Phillies. But they have not swept a series at Citizens Bank Park since 2019. And I had to look up the details to that. I did not remember that off the top of my head. That was Wilkin Castillo. That's a name from way back in the memory.
Yes.
Wilkin Castillo returning to the big leagues for the first time in like 11 years, had a really clutch double in the middle game of that series. Some of the other details I just completely forgot about, like this a bunch of guys hitting home runs in that final game. It was Garrett Cooper and Brian Anderson, and they're facing a Phillies bullpen game. Sandy had a really good start during that series, but that was more than 7 years ago, the last time that they swept there. It is not, you kind of alluded to it, it's not the House of Horrors that Truist Park is. There have been actually a good amount of Marlins series wins in Philly the last handful of years, but it's been 7 since the last sweep. So with that said, we're going to hear from one more of our partners at SeatGeek, and then come back on the other side to wrap things up with prediction time. Stick with us.
This is that time of year, AJ. It is baseball's time to shine. And it is SeatGeek's time to shine with MLB tickets and finding the best pricing, seating, and games that are even sold out available on SeatGeek.
Absolutely. If you want to go to the biggest matchups coming up, we have Yankees-Cubs coming up. There's Yankees-Red Sox. It means stuff again. There's some big moments that are coming up here. And as the pennant chases really heat up, go to SeatGeek and find those green tickets with the best deals and get yourself out to an MLB game.
Yeah, and they're straightforward with you. They will actually put a red dot next to a ticket that they don't feel is your best look. Green dot means very good. Code for you. It's Territory 10. 10% off your next set of MLB tickets at SeatGeek. That's 10% off MLB tickets when you use the promo code Territory10. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app and have the code automatically added to your account so you can use it later.
This is prediction time.
That's my prediction, but who knows?
This is prediction time. Let's do it. An updated look at our leaderboard very quickly. Still tied at the very top between Jeremiah Geiger and David Fernandez, one of our staffers and our super subs. For prediction time all season long, we keep track of both groups of people making their predictions. Our staffers, our super subs, our other live stream guests. How many games the Marlins will win in a particular series? Who will be the series MVP as determined by win probability added? And from this past series, a lot of people picked up points. Nobody got it perfect, though. Series MVP went to Chase Burns. And you can see me kind of still hanging around a little bit in 16th place overall, but in all likelihood, out of contention. Anytime between now and first pitch on Monday of this series, you'll be able to make your predictions on the site if you're so interested in doing so. And as Isaac has arrived at his destination, let's see if we could squeeze in a prediction from him before he goes. Let me just get the music queued up for this. You know how this works, Mr. Isaac. Your predictions for this 3-game set.
Man, things are getting fun. I think that the Marlins are actually going to sugar. I think they're going to lose 2 out of 3. This pitching matchup, Zach Wheeler's been there. Christopher Sanchez is a Cy Young candidate. And standing in that ballpark rubs me a little bit the wrong way. So I think the Phillies win 2 out of 3. I'm going to go with Christopher Sanchez, the series MVP.
Okay. I'm going to go mostly with Isaac there. I'm going to have the Phillies winning 2 out of 3 as well during the course of this series. I think it's going to be very close because this Phillies team, I picked against them in the previous matchup. They are, to me, a bit overrated still. Like, I don't think there is a big gap between these two clubs as currently constituted. It does still hurt that Stowers is out. I think this weekend is a little bit misleading in terms of where the Marlins stand offensively. As we covered, they did erupt against some very bad bullpens. This Phillies bullpen is better and a little bit deeper overall. So I just don't think you're going to see the Marlins kind of dominate 2 very close games late exactly in that same way. They'll have to get to these starters in a way that is, you really can't count on at all against Sanchez. One that you might be able to build up some confidence against Wheeler just because of what happened last time and the way that he has trended. And then Aaron Nola is more beatable in that series finale. But on the other side, the Marlins only have Sandy going, which means no, but not Yuri. And any series where they don't have both of those guys, it's really dicey. I'm going to the Phillies by a very small and frustrating margin, eking out 2 out of 3. And I'll give the MVP to Alec Boehm just because he's been very hot lately. The switch, what maybe it was the switch to the other side of the infield. I don't know what it was. Just maybe needed more time for his numbers to stabilize after a very slow start to the year. He has heated up. I know he's had some very big performances against the Phillies against the Marlins over the course of his career, and I think he'll have another one over these next 3 days to make the difference in the series. So that's been our show. Thank you to Isaac for joining me the second half of the program. And I'm Eli Sussman, the founder of FOF. This has been FOF Live on the Fish on First podcast channel, part of the Foul Territory Network. We are presented proudly by Jet Ski Rentals of South Florida. So we will be back after this 3-game set. And in fact, we may record on that off day, tentatively next Thursday night. Maybe we'll have a special guest to recap this series and all of its ramifications, because it is, you'd have to say, their most consequential series to this point in the season. And the Marlins don't get greedy and expect a sweep, but winning 2 out of 3, even that would go a long way towards making their pursuit of a wild card spot actually realistic for the first time in a few years. So we'll be back in a few days from now. We appreciate all the support. Stay locked into all we do at fishonfirst.com. And with that being said, as always, go fish.